All right, give me enough time. We'll get the technical stuff worked out. Good evening, or good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're watching the video. Glad you're looking at the video and considering our topic. Kind of a rocky start there. Uh, don't worry about it. We'll get it all figured out eventually. Anyway, this is Randomcast, Bradford Christian College, sponsor of Randomcast, and we are in a series that I started last week. Homeschooling may save the country, and um, please, if you haven't viewed last week's video or the first video of this series, um, please do so. We introduce our topic, and I would encourage you to watch that video. First, let me say Randomcast. Yeah, Randomcast is sponsored by Bradford Christian College. You can go to bradfordchristiancollege.com to find out more information. You can find information about the different bachelor's degrees, the Master of Arts in Theology. Contact them with questions, get more information. Um, for some of you who view this video, it will be the exact right choice for you. And it's an online college program, 4-year degrees can be earned. Um, but you're not alone in that online program. It's not like you just signed up and then you're left to make your own way through the courses. You're assigned a mentor who works with you, meets with you online, talks to you about your classes, challenges you with application of what you're learning, answers your questions that you might have that come up from what you're learning, and walks through the program with you to help you be successful in that. So, BradfordChristianCollege.com, check it out. Some of you are graduating high school this year, right now, maybe, and you're still wondering, well, what do I do? Well, maybe Bradford Christian College is the program for you. And I know you might think, well, okay, Christian college, well, then that's um, all about, like a Bible school, right? It's only about learning the Bible and being a minister, pastor. Well, certainly there's that component to it. But we have Christian education programs, great for those who are thinking about being a teacher in a Christian school or really just a teacher. But um, some of you young ladies may be thinking, I want to be well prepared to homeschool my children when the time comes. And our Christian education program is perfect to prepare you for that. Um, we have a Bachelor of Arts in Christian Counseling, and this is true biblical counseling. This isn't psychology that has infiltrated most of the Christian universities and is just teaching a man centered humanistic view. This is true biblical psychology. This is saying, what does the Bible say as our standard? And let's apply that to these different matters of counseling, while at the same time recognizing that there are real issues that need to be um, worked through. I mean, that's life, right? Life hits hard, and the best people who are prepared to help those who are dealing with things when life hits hard are those who are rooted and grounded in biblical counseling. And then we have a Bachelor of Arts in Christian Leadership. Now, this is a really unique program. I'm guessing that, I mean, the other Christian schools might have a similar title program, but um, this program is specifically designed, and it can actually be somewhat tailored to what you might envision yourself going into. But let's say as an example, let's say that you're thinking about um, dealing with matters in the political arena, right? Maybe you're not going to exactly run for office, or maybe you are planning to run for office, or maybe you're thinking about starting or working with an organization that deals with political issues or policy making, that sort of thing. It's a great program to prepare you for that sort of thing, because not only does it give you, as it's designed right now, not only does it give you opportunity to really study um, government, American government, politics, but also to learn about nonprofit, managing a nonprofit, that sort of matter. And in fact, I mean, if this is something, if you're thinking about perhaps running for office, you're going to have a situation where you're going to have staff that you need to manage, and it's I don't know that it's necessarily a nonprofit that you're set up as, but uh, you're going to have management type skills, and this program is wonderful for that. So that's just some insight into the programs we have. I encourage you, bradfordchristiancollege.com. Really check it out. Don't just listen to me and say, "Oh yeah, I should check that out." Really check it out and see if it's not an answer for you. Okay, so let me, as I am clearly technically challenged, let me bring this up. This is what we started with last week. We're talking about biblical education, and we took this passage, Deuteronomy 6:4-9, really as a mandate for teaching. And I would encourage you to go read that passage. Then we started using our Webster's 1828. And why do we use our Webster's 1828? Maybe in a future lesson we'll deal more with the 1828 dictionary and such. But suffice to say, for now, that Noah Webster is considered the father of American education. Why did he get that title? Well, because he was very involved in matters of education, curriculum, and such. And so, for that reason alone, he is a good source of information for us. Also helps that it was as he was working on his dictionary, in fact, from his own um, writings, we know this, that he became a Christian. And his dictionary is stunning in how much it takes notice of the way words are used in the Bible, and um, providing definitions that accommodate, or make, not necessarily accommodate, but anyway, take into account the different uses of those words in the Bible. So we're reading through this definition of education. So let's start there tonight, and we'll try to get back into the flow. Now, one of the things that I mentioned last time was that I went through the teacher education program at my local university, the university from which I matriculated and garnered my bachelor's degree. Garnered, earned, whatever, received. Uh, and as I said last week, I can honestly say that in going through the education program, I never heard once a definition of education, or even really anything that I could say, well, that okay, so that's the definition of education. What I heard was a lot of talk about what teachers should be thinking about doing within the boundaries of what we call education. Or I mean, I could tell story after story about what seems pretty silly in that whole thing. But I never, ever, 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 like even intro to education, right? The education 101, like let's build a foundation of education. I never, ever heard a definition like this. And this was a revelation to me when I finally cracked open Webster's 1828 dictionary and I read this definition of education, and it was like, this makes so much sense. Okay. And well, not only does it make so much sense, but for any of you who happen to come across this video at any point in time in the future, since it'll be on the internet forever, for any of you that you're a new parent, um, you're thinking about homeschooling, but you look at your little 4-year-old and you're thinking, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could educate them. I mean, maybe even think I wasn't that good at education? How could I possibly be a teacher of my children? Well, take comfort and take courage in this definition. Noah Webster defines. I mean, if you were to say, well, what is his straightforward definition? You would have to say this first phrase: the bringing up as of a child. And when you look at that 4-year-old, you don't think the word education, but you think the word, okay, I need to raise up this child. My guess is, uh, you don't you don't have a sense of, well, I can't do it. Certainly, you might think, well, there's going to be challenges, and yeah, there's going to be challenges. I mean, that's life, right? But my guess is you don't think about that phrase, the bringing up as of a child, in the same way that you think about education, right? Education, for some reason, maybe not just for some reason, but look, we have been so um, overwhelmed with the idea that there are these, for education to happen, there needs to be these yellow monsters that come down the street and open their mouth and swallow the children and take the children away to some um, building that's not unlike a prison building where they will remain for 8, 9 hours and be regimented and perhaps move from cell to cell and be arranged in classrooms and go through that ordeal only to have that mouth open up and they're back on the yellow monster and they're finally spewed out at the corner of the street that their house is on at 4:30. I mean, I'm stunned. Um, I'm able to observe, and like at 4:30 is when these school buses are delivering children, like first, second, and third graders back home. I mean, when I was in first or second grade, like 2 o'clock. I mean, the day was done at 2 o'clock, and I'm walking home. It's stunning to me how the days of these children are being dominated by this government program. But the point is, we are we're definitely brainwashed to think, okay, so that's how education has to happen. And there are many who decide, well, I'm going to homeschool, but then they try to run their homeschool in the same fashion. Okay, we're going to get up at this time. We go into our room that we designate our school room. We're going to be in that school room until 4 o'clock. Like it's like, no, just relax and have the idea that education is the bringing up of my child, right? Because if I hadn't called this homeschooling may save the country, if I'd called this series, let's talk about bringing up children, you would if you approached that video with a title like that, you'd think very differently about it. You'd think that, okay, yeah, let's talk about that, and you would probably have a sense of, I know some things about bringing up a child, maybe as a young parent, even an older parent. I don't know. You might have ideas of, okay, things that, um, ways to manage the bringing up of children, things that should be a part of bringing up of a child. And what Webster is saying in this definition of education, what he's saying is, if whatever you think of as being part of the process of bringing up that child, that's education. And so my point at this point is, um, you're already doing it. If you have a young one, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, you're already homeschooling. So just keep going. right? At some point, you're going to realize, well, my 5-year-old needs to be able to read, and in order to be able to read, needs to know the letters and then the sounds of the letters, and you just start with that. And you don't have to, you don't have to go to some publishing company and buy a whole 7 courses for a 5-year-old, right? We're going to do all this. I would say, like, probably the 2 things that need to start with are counting and learning the letters and their sounds, right? Let's be able to count and let's be able to read. Oh, but what about history? Well, there's time, right? Um, why pile on? But we'll get to that. Okay, so education, the bringing up as of a child, instruction. You do that all the time, right? Your child comes to a point and you say, okay, let me show you how to brush your teeth. Well, that's instruction. Let me show you how to tie your shoes. Instruction. Let me show you how to put your jacket on. Right? Let me show you the right way to enter the room. Okay. Let me show you the right way to behave when guests arrive at our house. Let me show you the right way to eat your food at the table. Right? I mean, instruction happens all the time. You're instructing. All the time you're engaged in education. So you can do this. Formation of manners, right? Good grief. That's especially younger, but even our older children, attention to manners, right? Show respect to your elders. Say thank you, say please, say excuse me, right? Your young men, open the door for the ladies. Hold the door for them, right? Um, help them down the stairs. Right, help, maybe that was the wrong word. Assist them down the stairs. At least offer a hand, right? Especially if you're at church or some other place where everybody's dressed up, and the young ladies might be wearing shoes that can be sometimes difficult to navigate stairs, right? Having a hand is kind, right? I mean, so formation of manners. And then we read this wonderful, this was the phrase or the sentence that really struck me when I was going through teacher education program. And it's, I think Webster very nicely sets out for us what constitutes education, what it is that we're pressing towards, trying to accomplish, okay? And so he says here, education comprehends all that series of instruction and discipline. And so we talked about the definition of instruction, pretty straightforward. We talked about discipline. I guess I don't see the definition here because that definition is kind of long in Webster's, but we talked about discipline. And the thing that we said about discipline is that we think of discipline as punishment often. But the first definition that he gives of discipline, in fact, let me switch to this so you can see it here. The first definition he gives of discipline is education, instruction, cultivation, and improvement. Comprehend correct sentiments, morals, and manners, and due subordination to authority. There's nothing there about, well, I'm going to have to discipline you, right? And we think about chastisement, and timeout, and I don't know, whatever strategies we land on for punishment, really. His second definition, instruction and government, comprehending the communication of knowledge and the regulation of practice. Okay. Third definition, rule of government, method of regulating principles and practice. Fourth definition, subjection to laws, rules, order, precepts, or regulations. I mean, still, we haven't gotten to that word chastisement or punishment in his definition. His fifth definition, correction. There it is, chastisement, punishment intended to correct crimes or errors. So yeah, there is that. I mean, you can come down here to the seventh definition, chastisement or bodily punishment. He's talking about the Romish church, as he calls it. But I don't know that he is acknowledging that that's something that happened. I don't know that he's saying that's what should happen. But the point is, chastisement, punishment is like a small part of the definition of discipline. And so in the definition of education, as Webster gives it, when he says instruction and discipline, yeah, he may be meaning at some point chastisement and punishment, but not mostly. Okay? And so the two things that are going on in education is instruction and discipline, right? Which, if you want to think about it this way, if you've ever sat down with your children to play a new board game, right? There could be a period of instruction where you go over the rules of the game. And then once you start playing, it's more disciplined, right? You're helping the child to remember the rules and apply the rules, to follow the rules, right? Now, I don't know that there's any reason to get to chastisement and punishment over a board game, but the point is, instruction gives the rules, the information, and discipline helps the child actually walk by those rules, right? That's a way to think about those two aspects of education. For what purpose, right? Well, this is the goal or the product, and we find he gives 4 purposes here that I've underlined. Enlighten the understanding, correct the temper. Well, I thought I'd underlined them, but my underlining doesn't look right anyway. Correct the temper, form the manners and habits of youth, fit them for usefulness in their future stations. Okay? And so we've got these 4 goals, right? Like if we think about, okay, so we're bringing up our children, which simply means we're educating them. We're going all the way with this. What's the target we're aiming at? Well, here's the target. As you bring up those children, make certain that you are enlightening the understanding, correcting the temper, forming the manners and habits of your youth, and fitting them for usefulness in their future stations. Okay? So let's start with this first one, enlighten the understanding. Okay? Let's start with that first one. And let's see here. And surprise, surprise, we're going to go to Webster's 1828 and enlighten. To make light, to shed light on, to supply with light, to illuminate, to quicken in the faculty of vision, to give light to give clearer views, to illuminate, to instruct, to enable to see or comprehend truth. Okay, so this number 3, notice here at the end, adds to enlighten the mind or understanding. So it looks like that number 3 in particular is most applicable to what we're talking about here, right? So as we're bringing up our children, whatever the topic is, whatever it is, brushing your teeth, folding the clothes, doing fractions, whatever it is, we want to have that moment where the child says, oh, now I see, right? I mean, that's a phrase that we often use to express, oh, I understand, right? We want the child to have an ecstatic moment of, oh, now I see. And then we know that enlightening has happened, right? So this is a key part of education, right? Instruction and discipline, right? Think about it this way. We're bringing up our child, we're educating our child, we're teaching them to fold the clothes, right? So there's going to be a period of instruction. And you're going to say, son, daughter, watch me as I fold the t-shirts, right? And you talk them through as you fold it, okay? Now, come here, and then you walk through folding another one together, okay? Still instruction, but you're kind of moving into discipline because you're helping them follow the rules of folding a t-shirt. Okay, now this one's for you to do. And they do it on their own, and you observe, right? And maybe when they finish, you tell them what they did well and correct them in what they didn't do well, right? There's instruction and discipline. And by the time you're done with that, right, there should be a light that you see in your child. Oh, now I get it. Now I see. Now I know how to fold t-shirts. And then the cool thing is, as a parent, um, next week or whenever, you can say to that child, oh, the dryer's done, the t-shirts are ready, please go fold the t-shirts. And the child can confidently say, I can do that. I've seen how to do that. I can do it. All right. So let's enlighten the understanding. Okay. Now then, let's look at correct the temper. Okay. Now, this is one that um, it's another one that has a word that's kind of like discipline, right? Because discipline, we think chastisement or punishment. And temper, we probably think, oh, temper tantrum. And of course, we have to correct that temper tantrum. But that's really not what Webster is talking about here. He's not talking about correcting temper tantrums. Okay? And so let's take a look at this. And we're going to need to start by looking at the definition of temper. Um, and so as we look at this, I mean, if this is your first time walking through Webster's 1828 definition, that makes me happy because it means that hopefully you are experiencing the same kind of things that I was experiencing when I first walked through this definition. And it's so helpful. It's so, and my understanding was enlightened. I mean, this part in particular was like a wonderful moment to think about this aspect of education. Okay, so that's enough build up. Let's get to it. And here's Webster's definition of the word temper. And if you're not familiar with Webster's 1828, oftentimes he has this bracketed portion. In that bracketed portion, he deals with what's referred to as the etymology of the word, like where this word comes from, how it arrives at the American English language. And so he looks at the other languages, older languages, from which this word derives. And so here you can see tempero, the Latin, to mix or moderate, and then the Italian and the Spanish, to temper, to soften or moderate, to anneal, might be worth looking at that word, as glass. But here's what really stood out to me in this: to tune an instrument. To tune an instrument. So hold on to that. To trim sails to the wind, to temper, allay, or abate, to temper, to mollify, enlargement, birth season. The latter unites this word with time, the primary sense of which is to fall, to rush, and to temper may be primarily to restrain, to lay or allay, to cause to subside. Okay? But it was this to tune an instrument that really jumped out at me. To tune an instrument. What's the purpose of tuning an instrument? Well, it's so that when it's used to play the piece of music, it sounds good. It sounds beautiful. It sounds right. I thought that was really uh, fascinating to think about. That as an aspect of what it is that we're aiming at with education, right? What we're aiming at is a correct tuning of that little instrument that is our child. And let me tell you why. Okay, but first, let me just point out that in the actual numbered definitions, he talks about to mix so that one part qualifies the other, to bring to a moderate state, as to temper justice with mercy. All right, so now right there you start to see, you think about yourself, you think about your children, you think about as Christians, we want to be people that are a right mixture of justice and mercy, right? We don't just want to be going around hammering people with justice, um, and there is no mercy for people. Neither do we want to just be all about mercy, and people are never called to account and responsibility for things, right? And bringing those into, as Webster says here, a moderate state. That it's so interesting. The mix, that one part qualifies the other, right? Think about that, right? That the the amount of justice, just to say it in a clumsy way, the amount of justice qualifies the amount of mercy. The amount of mercy qualifies the amount of justice. That they're actually mixing together the right way. Um, in fact, look at number 2 here. He eventually says to mix, unite, or combine two or more things so as to reduce the excess of the qualities of either and bring the whole to the desired consistence or state. In fact, he draws from the Bible. He draws from the Bible to understand this word, Exodus 30. You shall make it a perfume, a confection after the art of the apothecary, tempered together, pure and holy. Right? Nobody wants a perfume that somehow the ingredients are out of balance, and one particular ingredient overwhelms the rest, and you've got not perfume but stinky or whatever, right? Um, Look at number 3. I mean, you probably, I don't know if maybe you have done a word study on temper in the Bible, right? This is just fascinating to me. Number 3, to unite in due proportion, to render symmetrical, to adjust as parts to each other. God has tempered the body together, 1 Corinthians 12. Right? We read about the body of Christ and compared to a human body, and how the parts fit together so that the body functions properly, right? That's tempering. Okay. All right. So, why did this really jump out at me? Well, let's see if I can manage to find blah, 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 blah. I think it's in Philippians 2. Um, it's not Philippians 2. All right. This is what I get for not having this all worked out ahead of time. Let's see if I can find it. It's Ephesians 2. Ephesians 2. All right, we got it figured out. Ephesians 2. And see, probably you know this, and you're going to think, well, how could you think that was Philippians 2? That's obviously Ephesians 2. Okay, Ephesians 2, verse 10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to good works, which God has before ordained that we should walk in them. Okay, so why do I pick that verse? Well, because it reminds me that he who began a good work in you shall continue it, right? This is a promise that we have. And we need to remember that that work that's begun, we could say, by Christ, by the Holy Spirit, that work that God is working in me, he's not going to leave it undone, right? And I may feel like I'm undone, or I may have days where I feel like this is not going well. I don't feel very Christian today, or however we might phrase it. But just remind yourself that, okay, yeah, as far as, if we want to think about Christian behavior, maybe it has been a bad day, but don't forget that good work he has begun in you, he will continue. Okay, and so this verse right here, for we are his workmanship. Okay, what's so special about that? How does it work with correct the temper? Right. Well, remember I said that phrase, to tune an instrument, stood out to me. To tune an instrument, because it makes me think of art, makes me think of music. Music makes me think of poetry. And so what's interesting about this Ephesians 2:10, if I go to my King James with Strong's here, for we are his workmanship, and we look at the Greek word for workmanship here. I don't know how well it's going to show you. There it is. This word right here, poema, poema, I don't know. Anyway, I say poema. That looks, in fact, you almost hear poem, right? I don't think it would be improper to read verse 10 here as, for we are his poem, created in Christ Jesus. And, a poem, oftentimes that's what makes the lyrics to the music, right? Is a poem, poetry. And well, the point is that this correct the temper phrase that Webster puts in here, I would say it's very much like how God is working in us to make the poem that is our life more beautiful, more Christ-like, more expressive of our Savior, right? He's tuning us as an instrument to play that beautiful music. Okay, so that was I don't know how that strikes you. It struck me, right? But there's one other thing that struck me too with this correct the temper, to tune an instrument. Okay, and that comes probably a verse that you're familiar with, even if you don't. I'm going to say this. Hopefully, I've got the right reference, but even if you don't have the reference, you probably heard it. Proverbs 22:6, right here. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now we have to remember that this is a proverb. This isn't this is not presented as a rock solid guarantee, right? Proverbs are those statements that are generally true. Okay, they're not necessarily absolute promises to us, right? Because the moment you bring this up with somebody, oh well, I know that person, they were brought up in a wonderful household, and all things right, and then they turned into a terrible person. Okay, it's sad, and that's the world we live in. Okay, but look, if you want your child to become an adult that walks in the way he should, I'm going to say that the proverb tells us that the chances are much greater of that happening if during their training years you train them in the way that they should walk, right? Right? If you train a child the way he should be as an adult, chances are much more likely that as an adult he won't behave like a child anymore. That's just I would say it seems to make sense to me. Okay, so why does this come up with, is to tune an instrument, right? Well, when I think about an instrument, when I think about how Webster even tied this definition, temper, to Christ's body, God has tempered the body together. I mean, I guess it's not really Webster that tied it to it. It's God himself in his written word that tied the word temper to how he brings the body of Christ together. Right? To tune an instrument, if I think about my child as an instrument, not all children would be the same instrument in the orchestra, right? I mean, in fact, if I have more than one child, they're probably not all the same instrument either. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, so when I read this proverb here, train up a child in the way he should go, it's like, where's the emphasis in this verse to be placed? And I think the emphasis, or at least in that first phrase, I think the emphasis can rightly be placed in a couple of places. Because I think you could read this, train up a child in the way he should go, right? So you look at child number one, and you think about what's the way he should go, as distinct from the way that my other children might go. In other words, what do I see in that child that is unique to him? What are the things that he's interested in? What are the gifts that he seems to have, right? Is he really good working with his hands, or is he more of a thinker, a problem solver in his head? Um, right? I mean, and so I think it's one of the reasons why when children are younger, um, dabbling in a lot of different things can be helpful, because you can see what works and doesn't work, right? And so you can dabble in baseball and you can say, well, that's not for him, right? I don't think soccer's for anybody. I don't know why we subject our children to soccer, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, but like, I think that's can be helpful in their younger years, because you can start to see what comes out, and that can help you in training your child in the way he should go, as compared to the way that other of your children or other children go. So that was interesting, because I feel like that's goes along with the idea of tuning an instrument, right? Because you're going to tune the violin for its purpose, right? Tuning a piano, tuning a trumpet, whatever the case, they have their own special way of being tuned so that they can contribute to the whole of what the orchestra is going to play. But then you could also put the emphasis differently, right? So our first emphasis was train up a child in the way he should go, right? Think about the child. I'm not saying I'm not putting these in any order of priority, my emphases here, but right. So that would be a consideration. But then you could also say train up a child in the way he should go, right? The emphasis of the way, like there's a way that is right. There's a way that seems right, but there is a way that is right, right? I mean, Jesus said he is the way. So I mean, that is a way in which our children need to be tuned, right? They need to be tuned into that way that is the way of Christ. Um, but if we bring it to the instrument analogy, right? Every instrument is different, plays different roles in the uh, orchestra. I mean, um, I have seen this before in a performance, but it's not often that you get the tuba solo, right? And yet, the tuba provides an important foundation or undergirding, typically, of the piece. I don't even know what a triangle solo would sound like. I don't think there's ever been a triangle solo written, but you know, uh, those interesting percussion instruments have their place, right? And they are um, the little sprinkles that go on the cupcake that make the cupcake that much more enjoyable. You know, that idea. Um, but whatever the instrument, right? There are certain things that they all have to follow, right? There's certain rules of music that they have to follow, right? They have music in front of them and it has notation on it, and they need to obey the notation, right? So there's a way for that instrument to play. And yet, right? So think about piano players, right? You can have a number of different piano players come out to play, and the particular rules of music they'll all obey, and yet what comes out can vary because they bring themselves to the piece, right? And one is not necessarily right and another wrong. Okay. Um, all right. So um, that's why this correct the temper really uh, stood out to me in what Webster is aiming at, or says that education should be aiming at, the correcting the temper, thinking about my child as an instrument that wants to be tuned so that it it plays according to the rules of music, but it has space for my particular child instrument and his way of playing. All right. That's probably more meaningful to me than it is to you, but it's what I will share. Number 3 here, to form the manners and habits of youth. Okay, so I think that's pretty straightforward. I don't know how much we need to delve into that. I think that we know what manners are, right? Um, Manners, Webster says, deportment, carriage, the way one carries himself, behavior. And let me just say, um, when it comes to this, uh, well, again, let me bring this up so you know that I'm not fibbing here. Looking at Webster's definition of manners, deportment, carriage, behavior, conduct, course of life in a moral sense. And then from the Bible, evil communications corrupt good manners, right? So yeah, there's something to be learned here. Um, um, and notice in number 2 even talks about ceremonious behavior, right? So let's think about that for a moment, right? So there are the day-to-day manners of how we are to behave, conduct ourselves, how we are to carry ourselves, right? We need to help our children become those who can actually, when they're speaking to somebody, can look at them. They don't have to, head down and right. They understand the proper way to enter a room, neither too loudly nor too timidly. They need to know the proper way to greet someone. Especially our young men need to learn how to properly shake a hand, right? Um, I don't even know where I saw this in some TV show or some uh, movie. I don't know. We're talking about how to shake a hand, right? You don't want to come in too high. You don't want to come in too low. It's just right there, the sweet spot right there. But a good handshake is important in terms of setting the proper mood for when you're meeting somebody, especially in a more formal business type setting, particularly for an interview, right? These things are important, and they need to be part of what we teach. And some of that is developed in the way in which we expect our children to respond to us, even in the midst of um, our doing of a math lesson. How do we want them to speak to us when we're doing that math lesson? And um, even practicing. I know one family that they would practice things like asking a child to, okay, I want you to show me the wrong way to walk into a room and take a seat, right? And so the children get to act out bad behavior, right? Okay, now show me the right way to do it, right? Well, now there they are practicing, and they're demonstrating um, the difference, and um, they're being instructed in, yeah, this is the right way to do this. And so your bad way of doing it, don't be that person, right? Be the person that enters the right way. But then ceremonious behavior, how to behave in more formal settings, or where ceremony is a bigger part, right? How to behave in church. Okay, so think about, and I don't want to unnecessarily offend anyone or anything, but think about church, right? In fact, when my kids were smaller, younger, um, and we were attending church, it was a church where the children would come in initially, and then typically there was a moment where one of the pastors would talk about how much we love children, and then the next thing they would say is, and now follow this person out and go to children's church. Like, we love you, now get out of here, is kind of the impression. And I'm not accusing them of being that way or anything, but it was like, what? Now, um, my children were happy to stay with me, I think. Um, I don't know that I ever told them they couldn't go, but I told them I would like them to stay, and they willingly stayed um, in the regular service. And I wanted them there because I don't want them thinking that church service is like what goes on in children's church. I wanted them to know what church service was to be like, and the way that they should be in church service. And so they stayed with me, and we had our struggles. We had our, you got a 6-year-old or whatever. It's hard enough. Just think about yourself, right? It's a challenge to stay focused through the whole service and focused on the sermon. And so cut them some slack. Don't expect them to be, hyper focused when you yourself can't be, right? Raise the standard for everybody, hold yourself to the standard, but also recognize, we're all people, right? And stomachs growl and minds wander, right? So, but the point is, we should want them to know how to do these things, right? Because um, I tell you that the current crop of youth, let's say in the 20s, um, I've seen some in that age range that they have no confidence to actually, having been served what they decide is not a well prepared meal or food, they don't have the courage to return it, to go back and say, look, this is wrong, right? Um, and it shouldn't be that way. Right? They should be able to do that part of adulting, as they say now. We need to help them. Not that I'm saying we need to be the kind of people that are always, complaining and such. I'm not saying that, but um, when it's right to return a dish that's got a problem, um, we want our children to have the ability to do something like that. That's part of forming manners and habits of youth. And of course, there is it's not, as far as I know, it's not in the Bible. Maybe you can comment below and straighten me out. But there is a saying, was a song from the 70s, I think, that had this in it, that the child is father to the man. Okay. And one teacher, pastor that I respect, made the comment that, if the behavior that you're watching in your child is behavior that you wouldn't approve of in them as an adult, why are you approving of it now? Because that's what's being formed in them, right? And so what you want to see formed in them is the behaviors and the habits that are appropriate for the man, the woman that they will become. So, uh, so that's part of education as well. And so when we think about um, the assignments that we give, right? Let's think about some older ages, not just the youngest ages, but the older ages that are now reading assignments, a math lesson, right? A page of math problems to do, um, that sort of thing, an experiment to do in science. Realize that, yeah, there's the actual content that's wanting to be learned, but there's also the manners and habits that we want to form in them in their manner of doing those assignments. In fact, I saw a video, no, actually, it was a posting on whatever social media, X or whatever, um, of a teacher who was frustrated because um, the requirements for grading at the school, she had her students do a project. They were to make a poster, and her wish was that they would put in effort to make a colorful, meaningful poster about whatever the topic was. And so she had a student who did a wonderful job with a poster and color and artwork and such. And then she had another student who turned the poster work in late and had just written things in pencil on the poster. And according to the grading rubric, as they call it, she had to give them each the same grade. And she was really frustrated with that. In fact, the student who had really put in a good effort and produced a nice piece of artwork, really, as she described it, for this project, asked, why does mine get the same grade as theirs when there's clearly, and the teacher said, I didn't have an answer for that student. And she went to her administrator and said, what can I do about this? And the administrator says, nothing. You have to grade according to our rubric. And their rubric was, if they have the content, I'm not even sure what the whole rubric was, but they have the content, regardless of the appearance, it has to receive the grade of any other work that has the content, regardless of appearance, something like that. And it didn't even, in this case, it didn't even matter if it was done late. And so she said the students that have been putting in extra effort to produce really nice work are learning. Oh, well, why try? They're now not doing excellent work. They're now not turning assignments in on time, and you can't blame them, right? I mean, if that's if if we're at the Olympics and you get the gold medal just because you eventually cross the finish line, who's sprinting, right? Might as well just walk and you know preserve your body and boom, eventually I get there and I get the gold medal. Like this is not good. In fact, it's very bad. So we want to encourage excellence. In fact, I think, and this would be another thing that you can confirm in comments for me, but I think it was Martin Luther who talked about um, what a Christian shoemaker would be like, and he said, if I've got this right, he said that a Christian shoemaker would be the best shoemaker in the village or whatever, that because that's Christian character, that's Christian nature, right? And so we want that same thing in our children. Okay, last thing here, fit them for usefulness in their future stations, right? This kind of gets back to that Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go. What's a future station? And I'm not saying programmed future that, okay, son number one, you will be the doctor. Son number two, you will be the lawyer. And son number three, you will be the dentist. There, my retirement's taken care of. I wish I would have done that. Anyway, um, but that's not what this means, right? Although having um, ideas and having input into the child's life to say, well, I think that you should look at this career path, or what have you. Uh, in fact, I would encourage parents of youngsters now to really, 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 really think about not the traditional college path, but the trade skill path, right? HVAC, plumber, electrician. I mean, this is where people are needed desperately. And, you know, um, it's not uncommon now that you get a student that completes their high school education and goes into a trade skill program, right, where they do an apprenticeship and they start working. And it could even be an internship where initially they're not even getting paid. They're learning the trade and they become skilled at it and they receive the certifications and qualifications and begin to be a skilled labor in that field. And they follow that path. Another student follows the traditional college path and graduates. What this student who followed the trade path, what they've earned is not unlike the debt that this other student has incurred for their college path. That's the way. Now I say that, and I promoted Bradford Christian College. So let me say as well that Bradford Christian College is not like the other colleges. It's a good choice, and clearly there's some benefit. Obviously, there are benefit to a college program that's well designed and well selected, right? Yeah, but let's face it, we've got a bunch of college students that are graduating with just made up degrees, right? International studies or something. I don't know. Like, and they end up at Starbucks, right, serving coffee. um, uh, but you really want to think about. I mean, even if a student goes to college at the same time learning those kind of trade skills, auto mechanic. I mean, these are skills that, well, apparently AI is getting pretty talented. I don't know. I mean, I just saw the other day a video of AI robots doing the whole new tire installation on vehicles, and that skill, I mean, that job may be going away. But anyway, my point is that even even so, learning those trade skills is really valuable, and uh, don't neglect helping your child see that, right? But you want to think about their future stations, so that, in particular, the things that you're forming in them in their youth are things that will be applicable in their future stations. And fortunately, most of what you'll do in a home education setting is that, right? Because people need to know how to vacuum, dust, clean, wash dishes, run a dishwasher, um, cook. People need to know those things, regardless of whether they're a doctor or a garbage collector, whatever they end up in. All right, I've gone long enough, and we made it through those four goals, those four targets of, or those four aspects of the target that we're aiming at with education. Okay. Um, and so we'll leave it there this time. We'll continue on with our exploration of education, in particular, education that is homeschooling. Not homeschooling that is just whatever they're doing in government schools, that's what we're going to do in our house. Not that. But the kind of homeschooling, the kind of schooling that sounds, looks more like Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. The things that you need to know, like, I don't know, God's word, God's law. But then obviously other things that you need to know, taking care of yourself, cooking, cleaning, right? Oh, and yeah, the other things, being able to read and count and do arithmetic, and but those things are all just flow naturally in our home as the things that we do through the day. Um, that's what we're trying to build here, is that kind of vision, that kind of an understanding, and we'll carry on with that next time, Lord willing, in Randomcast, brought to you by Bradford Christian College, as we try to demonstrate that it could well be homeschooling that will save the country. So, join us for that next time.